In the days before the Libyan revolution began, Tripoli appeared calm. For Western institutions like the IMF, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. In fact, a mere 48 hours before people began risking their lives in protest, the fund issued a report. The outlook for Libya's economy, it said, remains favorable. In Egypt, the work of the revolution has at last exposed to the world what the IMF has long known, that the Mubarak dynasty has ruthlessly exploited its own citizens for decades. And yet, just last year, the IMF was praising the Egyptian government for its careful fiscal management. In Tunisia, the disgraced former leader, Zine Al Abidine Ben Ali, has already been found guilty, in absentia, of embezzling more than $25 million. And yet somehow, just months before he fled, the IMF credited the Ben Ali regime with sound macroeconomic management. This praise was little comfort to a young Tunisian man desperate enough to set himself on fire, or the millions of his fellow countrymen forced to live in economic destitution. Already, the transitional Egyptian government has rejected a new IMF loan, preferring instead to institute reforms itself. That's forced the new director of the fund to defend its work.
The IMF never forces programs down the throat of anybody. The IMF only offers services if it is asked.
And she says she understands why Egypt is choosing to go it alone for now.
If the country determines that it can actually organize its economic situation, this is great. But if it can't, and if it needs outside support and funding, then it should really think of the fund as an institution that is available.
It could be argued that the IMF simply misread the Arab Spring, badly underestimating the will of the people. But this logic falls apart when different examples are brought to bear, and a pattern starts to emerge. These countries all suffered under dictatorships, and all of them were given massive IMF loans. After the Duvaliers fled, Haiti realized 80% of its total debt was owed to the IMF. The same story in South Africa at the end of apartheid. Malawi, more than 80%. Somalia, more than 90%. Paraguay, Congo, Sudan, Indonesia. The legacy of corrupt leadership matched by the legacy of crippling IMF debt. These statistics may come as a shock to many in the West, but they might also help explain why the Arab revolutionaries had no choice but to take matters into their own hands. And this also helps to explain why the IMF is beginning to accept the growing global criticism.
What I see as a significant change in the last few years has been the ability of the fund, under the leadership of its managing director, to make the approach more comprehensive, to address the employment/unemployment issues, the social fabrics of society, as opposed to looking exclusively and in a sort of sanitized way at numbers.
This question of addressing the social fabric of society lies at the heart of the IMF criticism. The challenge for the fund and its new leader is whether the IMF is at last ready to listen to what emerging economies have been saying for years.